Hello and welcome to another edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, the best-selling truck in America for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Spear, and these are the times that try men's souls as we talk about the pending Independence Day celebration. Hasn't been enough to celebrate at Fenway Park, not since returning home. As we record this, heading into the Red Series, they've lost 7 out of 8. The probability of making the playoffs is down about it's less than half of what it was when Rafael Devers last swung a bat for the Red Sox, and I fear that we are going to spend the rest of the season, Alex, talking about June 15th as the line of demarcation, what they did up to Father's Day and what they did after the trade, because so far what they have done since has not been good.
Yeah, and look, like that may or may not be fair. That offense prior, even with Devers, was starting to sputter.
Right.
And they were not, they were the wins that they were forging at that point were like 3-2 and 2-0. And it was not their offense was not carrying the load. It was the pitching that was getting them through in spite of the offense. So that was not a sustainable formula. Regardless, you don't win that many games in Boston, especially when you're scoring 1, 2, 3 runs a game. But they have not the offense has not been as good without Devers as it was before him, and there's no one who's able to anchor the lineup. There's not a single spot of stability in the lineup when you're looking at. Now you have Jaron Duran bouncing between like leading off against right-handers and then moving down more middle of the order against lefties because there's a desire to get Rob Refsnyder in. And, so like from 1 through 9, I mean, Ceddanne Rafaela is probably the most stable part of the lineup right now. You don't really want your greatest lineup stability to be coming from the bottom of the lineup. And it's just been a rough stretch. They're clinging. They need to get hot fast. Otherwise the conversations in July become very different.
Well, this right as it'll be July when this is dropped,
Yep.
and with the All-Star break looming less than 2 weeks away, that takes roughly 5 days out of the mix as far as games in which you can get back into it. We're talking about a 12-13% playoff probability right now, and Craig Breslow, everything he has said publicly, he remains adamant that they are going to add, they are going to go all in, but it's really hard to make an argument for investing financial or prospect resources in a team with such a low probability of making the playoffs, isn't it?
Sort of. The one thing that keeps that like is weird about the calculus is that the odds can shift so quickly because everyone in the American League is mediocre. It's a staggering bit of mediocrity that's clustered around that third wild card spot. Now, other teams like you're starting to see separation between the first and second spots in the wild card race. So it's like,
Right.
that's why you all of a sudden have this like peloton of mediocrity where the Red Sox are kind of like maybe slipping back in that in that big group that's chasing after the one spot on the medal stand. But it's that does alter the calculus. If you get hot for a week, then you all of a sudden look like, oh yeah, like this is a very attainable phenomenon. And the interesting part with the Red Sox is that they are a team that has changes on the horizon, right? You have Yoshida, who's going to be starting a rehab assignment imminently. You have Bregman, where it's not an imminent start to a rehab assignment, but it's on the horizon, in all likelihood for the not too distant future. So like those are guys who have a chance to make the lineup look different. On top of that, obviously Crochet's been incredible. You then have both Bayo and Giolito, who are starting to look like the pitchers that you want them to be, right? Like where it's a reliable 6+ innings in most of their outings. So there are the components for the Red Sox. Like if you squint, you can see something happening in a couple of weeks that might make them, pretty viable. And again, that third wild card spot, it's pretty open because no one in the American League has been because there's that big group of teams that hasn't been mediocre at all or that hasn't
Yeah.
been consistent at all.
Right. It's not the Eckersley hodgepodge of nothingness, but it's perhaps the hodgepodge of mediocrity, and you're just trying to be a little less mediocre than the other mediocre teams. To your point, and continuing the Tour de France analogy, I mean, they are only 3 games out of a wild card spot as we speak, but they're in seventh. You are all the way in the back of the peloton. That's some nasty elbowing going on as you try to work your way up through the pack. That said, now the Reds have played better. There's no doubt about that. But Reds, Nationals, Rockies is kind of a stretch in which if you don't do it now, then it is going to be very difficult. If you wrap up that Colorado Rockies season, series rather, and you're 3, 4, 5 out of the wild card spot, and you've been playing sub 500 baseball for the last 2 weeks, you're running out of time to make the case, aren't you? I mean, with the All-Star break at that point, 3 games away, you're going to come back from the All-Star break with 10 days till the trade deadline. I mean, the time is just about gone.
Yeah, the Rockies represent the line of demarcation, right? Like last year, if you really think about it, like the Red Sox season was torched by being really bad in Colorado last year.
Yes.
And and that was where it was like, oh goodness, their bullpen is completely crumbling, in part because of extensive, probably overuse in the first half, because they had had this succession of close games, of close games in which they had been able to fight through and turn every lead into a victory over that month leading into the All-Star break. And then coming out of the All-Star break, they absolutely face planted against first the Dodgers and then against the Rockies, and then that was like, oh, their season is starting to has turned very quickly on a dime. They remained kind of resolved to pushing to try to contend and at least not sell. They had a relatively modest buy, right? Like you had James Paxton being acquired then, and Luis Garcia and Lucas Sims, none of whom ended up contributing meaningfully at all. But yeah, so the Rockies are an opportunity. Like these, you're absolutely right, TC. This is an opportunity to, if the Red Sox are going to show that they can at least tread water, if not swim, this is the time to do it.
And you need to pitch, right? And you mentioned earlier, you've got Crochet. Giolito's pitching really well right now, seems to have figured out some things. Bayo has really turned a corner and is consistently going 6+ now. The law firm of Fitz and Dobbins has sort of patched together, but Walker Buehler is an enigma wrapped in more mediocrity or whatever you want to call it. Here's what he said after Sunday when you saw him retire 10 in a row, right? Back-to-back home runs. Then it looked like he had locked in, right? Guerrero ambushed him on the first pitch. So 2 pitch, you're down 2-0, and all of a sudden he retires 10 straight. And maybe that play should have been made that got him the third out. Instead, the runner's on first, and it completely unravels. He never retires another batter. He only gets out of the inning because of the pickoff at first base. And we are left to be choked up about what's happening to Walker Buehler. But let's go right to what he had to say after, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. Here's Walker Buehler after Sunday's start on 310 to Love, presented by your New England Ford dealers.
Frustrating, to say the least. Obviously, the 2 big swings in the first, and one of them, the Barger pitch, I thought was, somewhat what I wanted. It was in off the plate, but kept a fair, good swing, and then obviously, a player like Guerrero can't leave that ball elevated. So, then kind of found it for a second. Was feeling pretty good second and third, and then kind of moment I got into any kind of pressure, everything kind of reverted to what I've been doing, and obviously we've been working hard this week and kind of throughout the year, but really think we're onto something with some of the mechanical stuff we're doing, and then the moment I get into kind of pressure situation, it just kind of reverts, and it is what it is. I think at the end of the day, the work that we put in this week, I think therefore, outside of the 2 homers, which is not something to just be brushed away, but generally I think I was executing a little bit better and kind of getting the quick outs and then the punch out when the third inning punch 2 and second inning really quick and get the first couple outs quick, and I think that's what I do when I'm good, and so I was feeling pretty good about it, and then just kind of lose it, and somewhat even more frustrating than the ones in the past couple starts, just because kind of felt like I had it there for a second, and then kind of falls through your fingers. But kind of no matter what happens, I think I'm on the right path in terms of kind of identifying where we need to get certain things, and kind of probably halfway there in terms of the stuff that we're working on, and I'm kind of proud of what we did this week and the improvements that came from that. But at the end of the day, this is a results business, and I'm not getting results.
Would you classify the walks in the fourth as kind of a result of falling out of your delivery, or is that too simplistic?
Yeah, I think so. I think I had the delivery kind of where I wanted it in the second, third inning, and even after the homers, I think the first inning, the delivery, I felt pretty good, and then control your heart rate, that kind of stuff. That I think when you're throwing the ball the way you want, I think that stuff is kind of secondary, and let's control the heart rate. But when you're scuffling, I think it probably becomes even more important, and something that I'm used to kind of having somewhat on autopilot or kind of in the back of your mind outside of executing. And it's just a hard game.
You mentioned being halfway there and doing a lot of good work this week. What specifically did you improve on or drill down on that you feel good about?
I'm just trying to get my arm up, right? I think, for years, going back to 22, 23, 24, all through the rehab process, I think I just got into some bad habits of I think lazy is not the right word, but when I'm at my best, my elbow's really forward and my arm's really high, and for 22 to last year and this year, it's been low, and I think the spray pattern is bad. I think the shapes are kind of early, and I think when I get my arm up, I think the ball acts a lot better. And typically past couple of years it's been around 40 degrees, and when I was really good it was 50, and so today it was in the 44 or 45 range, which is a big step forward, but also not where I want it to be. But when I got it up there, it was a lot closer, and metrically the heater, I think when I can get it to cut or baby cut, I think is when it's really good, and there at the end, I threw a couple that were a lot more similar to that. So there's glimpses of it, at least in my head, and it's hard, I think, as a fan or somebody that's watching this game, for me to say that I feel a lot closer is hard to hear. And I've run out of ways to say that I'm embarrassed by what I keep running out there with, but it's not for lack of effort from the organization or myself. It's it's hard to break habits that are 2 and 3 years long, and I'm working my ass off to do it, and it's just frustrating, man. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm so excited to be a Boston Red Sox and want to be really good here and really enjoy being around this group. But it's getting to the point I can't just expect to run out there and give up 4, 5, 6, 8 runs every time I walk out there, and be a part of a group that deserves a lot more out of me.
Walker, for as much as you have accomplished in the game, do you almost feel like you're kind of fighting just for your spot right now in the rotation?
Yeah, I think I'm fighting for my spot in the game, honestly. I think at some point, throwing the way that I've thrown, there's not a lot of places for 7 ERA starting pitchers in the big league. So, I don't know what the next step is, and obviously, I want to take the ball every fifth day and keep going and keep fighting. And but at the end of the day, we have depth and talent in this organization, and there are realities in this game. So, kind of regardless of whatever happens, I'll kind of keep going and keep trying to figure it out. I think I kind of owe that to my family and to myself, given the rehab that we go through and what that does to you. And I'm going to find it and have a run. I just don't know when or where that'll be.
Regarding your spot, Alex, after your last start, said that they would have to talk about you making this, and then the very next day he was definitive and quick and saying.
Yeah, I think I pretty much just answered that, man. Thank you.
But I mean, did they tell?
I just answered that.
All right, we have shown Alex on the pregame, postgame show his over the head, not over the head, like he's trying a lot of different things on the mound. And when you hear those comments yesterday, you realize there's a lot going on in the head of Walker Buehler right now. How does he get himself out of this? How does he keep a spot in the rotation when he seems to be so lost physically and mentally right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's not dissimilar to what he endured last year, because if you talk to Dodgers people, there was a lot going on with self-doubt coming back from Tommy John surgery last season, where he was really worried about whether or not he could ever get his mechanics right again. And where I think we're kind of in that mode now. The one thing that's interesting is that he talked about the fact that he does feel like his arms, like he's identified the thing that's critical, which is pretty easy to find, right? Like the arm slot has dropped pretty significantly from his absolute peak. It had been dropping before Tommy John. It dropped even more after Tommy John, and so now he's trying to get back to a slot that works for him. But he also recognizes that like you don't get a free pass. You don't get, the team can't wait around, right? Like, so here's one way of thinking about this. When Red Sox starting pitchers allow 4 or more runs this year, team record 6-22, terrible, right? Like you're winning basically 1 out of every 5 games. When they allow 3 or fewer runs, the team's record is 35-22. You have a better than 600 winning percentage, and Walker Buehler is finding himself on the wrong side of that equation with such frequency that it unquestionably, like as much as they think that there's a path for him to be a positive contributor, there's only so much opportunity that can be afforded.
In an ideal world, Tanner Houck would be lights out in Worcester right now, and you'd be saying, all right, he's knocking on the door, he's ready. Again, another rough outing for him. They're trying an opener just to get him out of his own head. How does this play out with Tanner Houck? Where does he fit into this, if at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I think that this is there's an ongoing search that's happening. They seem to feel like he's physically in a better spot than he was before he landed on the injured list. And yet the stuff has yet to bounce back. Now, Houck for me has always been a kind of kaleidoscopic pitcher where like things, because his delivery is so funky, like things like can look really flawed, and then all of a sudden you keep twisting the images and whoop, it pops into place as something that makes sense. And like that's something that happened to him back in 2017, or rather 2018, in his first full season of professional baseball when he was in the minors. He had a disastrous first half, and all of a sudden it clicked, and he was really good in the second half. So they're still waiting for the click though. And until the click happens, you can't really put him back up in the rotation. I think that like Kyle Harrison, there's a lot riding on some of the adjustments that he's making, because he's probably closer right now, at least in my mind, than Tanner Houck.
You know who'd look pretty good in a Red Sox uniform right now? Quinn Priester. Quinn
Hmm.
Priester would probably fit into the backside. There's so much that has gone on with this team since then. Was that a mistake? Was the time like they misjudged the pitching depth that they had when they went out and made that deal, or is that still a deal you do because of what you got back?
Oof. Totally fair question, and I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, I think that like Dobbins and Fitz have both been serviceable. At the time, Quinn Priester was looking like you probably had him behind those two guys in the pecking order. I think that his success in Milwaukee has been kind of surprising. The consistency of it has exceeded anyone's expectations. The Red Sox did help him to get to be a better version of himself before they traded him. The in terms of the return, like would he be in the rotation right now if he had not been traded? I'm not entirely sure. Like, would he have unlocked that level of dominance, or not even dominance, but consistent quality that he's demonstrated in Milwaukee? Tough
Yeah,
to
he
say.
may not have ever had the chance to do it here, right? Like he
Right.
may not have
He
been in
was
the
he was further down in the
rotation.
pecking order. He was
That's
probably
right.
like
That's
7 or 8 on the
100%.
depth chart, and they didn't know that they were going to be losing Cutter Crawford for the season at that point.
Yeah, which is probably one of the things we won't talk enough about this, but that is a massive blow considering where you had him, really coming into camp, right? Let's run it all the way back to January. You're thinking, oh, Cutter Crawford now, get him back to anywhere near what he was when he was fully healthy, and away we go. And he will have never thrown a pitch for this team. The combination of no Cutter Crawford at all and Tanner Houck, not being anything close to what he was the first half last year. I mean, that's a big blow to the expectations of what this rotation could be.
Yeah, and then on top of that, what we were talking about earlier with Bueller not having been able to build consistently off of that really strong postseason performance last year, and instead being more of his mid 2020 form, at least since coming back from the injury. that yeah, there was they in April, it looked like they were they had this like forming rotation depth when, Fitz made a positive impression. Dobbins looked good in his debut, and they were kind of clicking through those first few weeks of the season. And Crawford seemed to be on an upward trajectory. That's not where they are right now. And yeah, so but we also shouldn't exaggerate the rotation as being the weak link here, because again, three out of their five starters are giving them
Right.
pretty good quality. I really think that this is that foremost, this is about the offense.
Well, the problem is that the offense is giving them no margin for error.
Yeah,
To your point about the
great
four
point.
runs plus, right? When you get a bad start from Walker Buehler every fifth day for the last month, that's almost a guaranteed loss every fifth day. And then you add up from there. All right. Good day to talk pitching, because we're going to talk about one of the best to ever wear a Red Sox uniform. Luis Tiant passed away last October. We still miss him terribly. And so obviously, as we gather around the celebration that's going on these 3 days, Cincinnati Reds back in town, 50 years since the Reds, the big red machine, rolled into Fenway Park and won the 1975 World Series, still one of the great World Series in baseball history. There a lot of former players will be part of our broadcasts this week. We're even doing the retro one Tuesday night, where we're going to wear 1975 type clothes and have old graphics. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we wanted to talk about Luis Tiant because, that World Series, they were 3-0 when he started, 0-4 when he didn't. And if he could have started off, just the fourth game, I think they would have won that World Series. Because if they had Jim Rice, they would have won that World Series. But don't get me going. Young Tom Caron is getting angry now. So we'll get back to get me out of my childhood. But great conversation here with Dan Tiant, the son of Luis Tiant, talking about his father and the legacy in 1975, what it all means to his family and to Red Sox Nation. Dan Tiant, our guest, on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. With the Reds in town this week, we're spending a lot of time celebrating the 50th anniversary of the 1975 World Series. For those of us of a certain age, that was the year that made us Red Sox fans for life. Joining us is Dan Tiant, son of Red Sox Hall of Famer, should be baseball Hall of Famer, Luis Tiant. Dan, I'm sure a lot of memories for your entire family this week with the Reds in town, and a lot of people talking about 75, a lot of highlights of your father pitching. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
That 1975 World Series, and your father had a tremendous career, played for multiple teams, but that 75 World Series and his performance, they were 3-0 in his starts, 0-4 when he didn't start. And he could only start three games because you start out of him for game six. But what did 1975 mean to your father? What did that run that year, sort of captivating all of New England? What did it mean to your father and to your family?
Well, it meant everything. It meant the world to us. That was probably one of his best seasons overall, experience-wise. I mean, getting to play in the World Series, he always talked about that being a dream of his, being in that spotlight. It was also the year my grandparents came to Milton from Cuba. So it was really a fairy tale year for our family, but more importantly for my dad. To be able to pitch in front of my grandfather was just something that he never thought he'd be able to do. So it was just that one year that everything just clicked together for him. It was just an amazing year for him, for him and our family. I was still a little bit, I was only a year old at that time, but I was still able to understand a little bit and comprehend, and just having the family together was probably the most important thing in his life.
It was such an extraordinary time, Dan, because when you do talk about the fact that your grandfather and grandmother got to come to the States from Cuba, this wasn't just a baseball story, right? Like, it was kind of a transcendent story that all of the local news stations were covering. There was this like remarkable reunion that was happening in the airport at Logan, in August, I believe, when they finally made it over. And your father had already ascended to kind of iconic status in Boston. There had already been the Louis chants. From my understanding, I was born in 75, so I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. But those had already started in 1972, when he almost propelled the Red Sox back into the postseason almost single-handedly with this incredible run. But how much are you aware of that part of the story, of just this idea that it was your grandparents' arrival in the States was being negotiated at a national and international level with, with Senator George McGovern handing off a letter to Fidel Castro in Cuba. Like how mind-blowing is that story to you of their arrival?
Um, it's very mind-blowing. It's one of those things, like I said, I was young at the time, so I didn't know the importance of all of this. But as I got older, and it's one of the things I always enjoyed with my dad was just talking to him about life, his experiences, and then he would tell me, you haven't experienced anything like I have, and he was right. But it meant a lot, and just the significance of that on the global scale, I thought was pretty big. Once you sit down and see the importance of that, and Senator McGovern talking to Castro and trying to get my grandparents here, um, you know, all you could just do is just say, wow. Like I'm like, this is crazy. This is nuts that we're at this level of discussions, and my dad really just wanted to see his parents, and it was an issue that many Cubans dealt with and to this day still do. So it was very meaningful to be able to sit down with him and talk to him and just share that experience with him. It was really something special.
Some of the most extraordinary conversations that I've had in covering the sport were with your dad, thinking about the life experience that everything that he experienced in order to become a Major League Baseball player. Starting with pitching in Mexico City as I believe an 18-year-old, right? And then but then once he was in not being able to go home, having to leave behind his parents in Cuba. Once the Castro regime banned freedom of travel in and out of Cuba in 1961, to the fact that he was trying to find his way in the Sally League in the early 1960s without speaking any English, and this was before there were interpreters, any
Right.
of that. Like how incredible, how mind-blowing is it to you to think about the path that your father forged and all that he had to do in order to cement himself as, not only on the field, but everything he had to deal with off the field, including Jim Crow laws and, legacy of Jim Crow laws and discrimination in the South in order to find his path.
Right. It's incredible. I mean, you sit there and talk to him about these real life situations, and we think we have it tough. I always thought I had it tough growing up in Massachusetts with some of the issues I dealt with, but he would just sit there and laugh and be like, "You haven't dealt with anything, buddy." And it just shows the strength of, his inner strength to really continue moving forward to accomplish his dreams, his goals. And he had one thing in mind, and that was to be in the big leagues. And he sacrificed a lot in his life to get there. Um, and it just showed the strength of who he was. And a lot of those players, we talk about the Cuban players, and he always mentioned it. Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, all these other players were able to go home to their families in the wintertime and off seasons. He goes, Cuban players didn't have that chance. That's why you see, Tony Oliva living in Minnesota. My godfather who just passed away, Diego in Kansas City. These guys, that was their home, and they made it their homes. My dad in Boston. So it just showed the resiliency of who they were as men, not just players, but trying to fulfill that dream. So it taught me how to be a better person, be a better man, and continue moving forward in my goals, my dreams, and in my life as well. So pretty fortunate to have him as my teacher, not only my best friend, but he's my teacher and all that.
Growing up here, I was 11 in 1975 because I'm old, and I almost ruined my back trying to emulate your father's windup in Little League, as everyone else did. I used to always tell your father he ruined more pitching careers from kids who tried to throw like that. Dwight Evans ruined more hitting careers because we all tried to hold the bat like him. Right? That 75 team, just it was everything. It was that we remember it from '04, but the whole Red Sox Yankees saga of '75 was, the college kids, the wild group from Boston against the button down Yankees. And it was just so special. And when your grandfather came back in the middle of that summer, I think it was August, and actually got to throw out the first pitch at Fenway Park. Just imagine not seeing your parents for 14 years. So you could father talked about like Alex just said, having to leave everything behind to try to prove who you can be, and then doing that so well that the world kind of comes around you, your country comes around you to bring your parents back and to bring that full circle. He talked about it again when he finally got back to Cuba, right? All those years later. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in that summer of '75, I remember, I was in Maine, and people in Maine were crying because your grandfather had arrived in the United States. It was just an incredible story, and your family was right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it really truly was. And you mentioned that first pitch. I actually have that ball right there.
Oh, wow.
Incredible.
So when I was a little kid, when I was a baby, my grandfather always would just try to grab that baseball from him. So he'd get pissed off to the point where he finally said, what, I'm just going to give him this damn ball. So my grandfather dedicated that ball, so I have it here with me still.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it
The
was.
story, he threw two that day, if I recall. He didn't like his first one. He got it back and then threw a perfect strike.
He didn't like the first one. He wanted to throw another strike. And the best part about it was watching my dad in the background because he was getting pissed off. He wanted just to get the game going. And my grandfather's out there soaking up all this limelight. He goes, I want to throw this pitch again. And you just see my dad in the background, just like, all right, let's go, let's go. So it's pretty entertaining.
Between the delivery and the fact and the way that your dad pitched, right? Like that kind of incredible determination to complete what he started. There are reasons why he was an iconic force and why it's kind of mind-blowing to think about things that your dad did during his career. Last year I got to do a story on the 50th anniversary of the game he threw against Nolan Ryan, right? When Nolan had the 12 inning, threw 12 innings and something like 237 pitches, and your dad threw a 14 and a third inning complete game and took the loss. And like I think about that, like I think about, Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, right? Like, and just kind of like the determination, no matter what, to see something through to the end. And, as you tell the story about his arrival in the States from Cuba, I think that there's something that's really connected to that. One of the things that made your father so iconic in that '75 World Series was the fact that he was throwing these 163 pitch complete games in the World Series. What did complete games mean to your dad? How much did he like having that as part of his pitching identity?
It meant everything. He was a competitor. He wanted to finish the games he started. It was the mindset of players back in that era. They finished what they started. And nothing against relievers, nothing against closers, but that's just the way they were brought up. And that was the thing with my dad. He always said, he goes, you're not going to take me off this mound. It's just over my dead body. You'll do that. And he was serious about it. He took a lot of pride wearing the uniform, pitching in front of the crowds, his fans, and finishing what he started. And he was just relentless when it came to that. He really was. You look at him as the guy who would be just a guy who likes to joke around. He was very loose. But when he was there on that mound, he was a different person. And that's just how he handled every game. It would be pretty hard for you to get him off that mound and bring in a reliever for sure.
I'm glad you brought up that sense of humor because I think that's, his ability to connect with people, right? He was just, you would have no idea how tough he was as a competitor, right? And Jim Rice, who loved, we should have done a reality series over a couple spring trainings, just following Jim Rice and your father around, giving each other a hard time on the golf course. But Jim would tell you, man, there's no one I would have rather had on the mound in a game we needed to win. And his experience, and I was telling you this before we taped, we were showing current players clips of the 75 World Series the other day and getting their reaction, and the video of your father running the bases with his jacket on. It was a scoreless game. Game one was scoreless until he got the rally going in the seventh inning with a base hit. And they put the jacket on him, and Yaz drove him in, and that jacket's flapping in the breeze as he runs around. But his experience, I think, is what made him such a great teacher, such a great coach, right? Such a great baseball man in his retirement life. His ability. I can't count the number of pitchers I have seen him talk to over the years where he would just say a little something. The pitcher later would say that unlocks stuff. Derek Lowe used to talk about it all the time. Like, I would just have conversations with him about situations. Yeah, we were completely different pitchers, but situations, how to get out of them, how to deal with them. And you've made a life in baseball. Like, he was a baseball man to the core. It was an incredible life.
He really was. He's very philosophical, very intelligent man. Life to him was something that's very special, very beautiful. Family, number one. He was fortunate to have a great career, but he was like a Zen Buddhist kind of guy. You would talk to him and just like I would just sit there and listen to him like, okay, wow. And I remember him talking to, Derek Lowe, Schilling, all these other pitchers that have gone through the organization, and they would always say the same thing. It's like, just talking to him, it's like he doesn't talk about baseball. He talks about life. He talks about the other things around, all the other components, and what to focus on, and not only be a better pitcher, be a better person. And it almost like would soothe these guys, and they would learn so much from him that it would eventually make them, better pitchers at some point or another. I know Chris Sale to this day just speaks very highly of my dad. He got to meet my mom and my sister at Fenway, and he made it a point that he wanted to meet them at their last road trip because of what my father meant to him and what he taught him. And those are things that, as a son, I'm so extremely proud of. He was able to teach all these guys and give them a little bit of himself to them, and it's very meaningful. And they still remember that, and they don't forget that. So
it was, it is fascinating to think about because I think that your father was a renowned competitor, one of the great competitors. Again, someone who was pretty driven to take things to the limit and to explore the full extent of his abilities. He wanted to keep the ball into the ninth. He might have been tired, like he wouldn't have admitted it. He did all of the work running stairs in stadium after stadium, ballpark after ballpark, in order to build up that stamina. But he wanted to push his limits. He was kind of graceful in my mind in he wanted desperately to win, but was graceful about not winning, right? Like, I think that was, one of the things that was striking about talking to him about that, like 1974, 14 plus inning complete game was, he accepted that was a meaningful part of him. When you think about 1975, he was probably this close to being, he would have been right up there in World Series MVP voting. What was the meaning of the 1975 World Series, which was the greatest World Series ever, the most watched one ever, right? And this extraordinary thing where two teams had pushed each other to the limit, and yet the Red Sox lost. What was, for your dad, the legacy, the legacy and meaning of the 75 World Series?
Obviously he wanted to win it. He was, like I say, he's big competitor, always wanted to win, but he lost, and he was very graceful when it came to that too. He understood one had to win, one had to lose. It's something that solidified him. He was already a great pitcher. He already had done great things with Cleveland, and he was bringing that vibe to Boston, and just Louis. We talked about it before, Pedro, before David. He did. He wanted to win it for the city. That was, I think, the biggest thing that hurt him. He was proud of what they did, and he always said, if we had Rice, we would have won that series. But he was very proud of what he did, and he wanted to win it for the city of Boston and New England. That was his biggest thing, I think, that stood over him. It wasn't really for him, but for the community and the love that the city of Boston gave to him. He always said it. He would say it was my second country. I'm like, Dad, second, it's your first home, your second home. Like, no, it's like my country. And he just loved the embrace that New England had, the love and the embrace for him. So I think that was the biggest thing that really would hang over his head when it came to that series.
I'm glad you said that about that series because I want to follow up on that about now, right? This week we're celebrating that team. Wednesday, your mother will be at the ballpark. They're giving out a Louis Tiant jersey. And that continued support, the love and affection that you've all felt since we lost your father last October. What has it meant to your mother? What has it meant to the Tiant family? What has it meant that his legacy is clearly strong here in Boston and has not been forgotten and won't be anytime soon?
It means the world. Um, it's helped my mom a lot. It really has. The Red Sox have been phenomenal with our family while Dad was around, and now that he's gone, the organization has been first class with us, and that means a great deal because I have other childhood friends that Dad's played on other teams, and I don't think they get that type of support from the organizations like Boston gives the players in Boston, which means a lot. It makes things a little bit easier, so it means everything to us. And I've seen it with my mom. She's spent a few times with me down here in Florida, and it eases the pain a bit. It's never going to go away, but it shows what my dad's hard work, love for the game, love for the city, what it brings back to us, and the love and support of anybody from Massachusetts, and for that matter, New England. You know, um, we talk about that. My dad played in a time that, you want to talk on a racial standpoint, wasn't the best. But he brought that city together. And it's one thing he always said. He goes, "You respect others, I'll respect you. Make them get to know you for who you are, not the color of your skin." And I'll hear from a lot of people, "How can you live in Boston? How do you like Boston?" Boston's Boston's my city. As much as I live in Florida, I love New England. I love Maine. I love Massachusetts. I love going back there. It means the world to me to go back there. And I never saw it as a color thing. We experienced it, but like you said, when you build that love and that respect from others and they get to know you for who you are as a person, he found no better place to be than in Boston. And it shows now. It still shows now with him being gone and what the organization has done for us, what they do for my mom, and what people in general. I mean, I've seen him. I mean, my mom threw out the first pitch at JetBlue, and then the home opener in Boston, and just seeing the fan base, how much they gravitate to her, and just the condolences, the love. There's nothing more than to say, but thank you to them because it really does mean the world to our family.
It truly is extraordinary to know the depth of feeling that exists about your father. And one of the ways in which that manifests itself is that anytime that you mention him, that you write about him, all of a sudden you are barraged by people saying, Hall of Famer, what are we doing? I mean, he was, again, when we talk about fame, when we talk about iconic, transcendent players, there are plenty of people who were born generations after your father pitched and yet know what he looked like on the mound. Now, I obviously your dad had mixed feelings about the question of being inducted into the Hall of Fame after it, when if he was not to be alive during that time. He saw it with Minnie Minoso, who someone who he had a very special relationship with and a great relationship with. At this point, I think TC and I both have pretty strong, like, this is an obvious one. He is one of the great, he is, if there is a Hall of Fame, your dad belongs in it as someone who was both an extraordinary performer and who was famous in the most basic sense. What are your feelings about that Hall of Fame question, and how much does it mean to you to just see this constant outpouring of support, saying, like, regardless of whether he's in, there are legions of people who think that your dad is a Hall of Famer.
Well, he was very clear about the fact that if they inducted him after he passed, for us not to go. He was eligible this past year. which Dave Parker got in, and unfortunately he passed away. Um, we had discussions within us as our family on going if he did get inducted this year. It was hard for me because I was going to go against his word, but I felt I had to do it. I felt we had to do it. He didn't get in. It's one of those things that I still talk about with my mom, and I think she finally says if he does get in, we don't go. Next time up. It's heartbreaking because he did so much for the game on and off the field, and his numbers prove it. It hurt him, but he was also pretty, how would you say it? He was pretty clear with the fact that family was number one. And he always said, my family's my Hall of Fame. So he knew he didn't have to prove anything to anybody else. He knows what he did out there. His numbers show it. His personality shows it. And the fan base that still remember him and still talk about him, they know it. So he did his job. He's like, I don't need more accolades. And Hall of Fame is an ultimate thing. It's an ultimate honor for all these players. But he's like, I don't need this to show the world that what I did was something special. So, that's how he felt about it. It's an ultimate honor, but he's like, I'm not going to bend over backwards and, do this and do that to try to get in. He's like, I know what I did and they know what I did and it's on them. And that's pretty much how he lived his life, with everything as far as the Hall of Fame talks. So as he always said, he goes, my family is my Hall of Fame, and that's how he left it.
No, that's beautifully said. And, again, he did it his way, right? From start to finish. And if there's any justice, he will get his plaque in Cooperstown where it belongs. And we'll keep banging the drum and doing what we can do to make people remember. But with the 75 season front and center this week, we really appreciate the visit, Dan. It's great to catch up. Hope to see you at Fenway soon. We'll see your mother on Wednesday. And just thanks for the time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. And I'll definitely see you up. I'll be coming up to this year.
I have no doubt. I know. You'll get up here. He'll get up here. Dan Tiant with us, son of the great baseball pitcher, the Red Sox Hall of Famer, Luis Tiant on 310 to left. Great conversation with Dan Tiant. He's still very involved in baseball. We see him a lot of time at spring training, lives primarily in Florida. But, it's spring training, Alex, where I couldn't help but think of Louis almost every day because he was such a fixture there on his golf cart, just driving around the fields, talking to pitchers, talking to us, talking to anybody. There's nobody I would rather talk baseball with at spring training than Luis Tiant.
And the relationships that he forged across generations, you heard it with how Dan talked about the importance of Louis to Chris Sale, but seeing it over the years, when he would show up in the clubhouse and talk trash with John Lester, right? It was just it was hilarious. And but there was also something that was so warm and wonderful that did span across generations. I remember in 2019 there was this kind of special moment where if you looked around on this backfield at Fenway Park, and or rather at JetBlue, there were almost no fans around, but you had Luis Tiant there on his golf cart, and you had, Pedro talking to, I don't even remember, it might have been Rick Porcello on the mound, and Derek Lowe was out there as well. And you just had this extraordinary glimpse of different Red Sox pitching generations that were brought together. And, Luis Tiant represented part of that fabric. Even though his time with the Red Sox spanned about a third of his career in the big leagues, something like that. Nonetheless, the depth of what he meant to the organization and to the people who cared about the organization, it went so far beyond that it's mind-boggling. And it meant a lot to be able to talk to Dan about that.
Fun fact, the first time I ever interviewed Luis Tiant, he was the head coach of the Savannah College of Art and Design in 1998 when I was a young reporter at Nesson. Scad was in town playing somebody. And I was reading, I'm like, wait, this says Luis Tiant is the head coach of the Savannah. That can't be right. And we went up on it. It was this great story about, these art and design majors playing baseball for one of the toughest major league pitchers to ever wear a uniform. But it was perfect for Louis, right? It was just him continuing a baseball life, and I'm so glad we get to celebrate it this week.
Yeah, and that, by the way, Scad turned out a major leaguer and a Red Sox major leaguer as well in the form of
That's right.
Charlie's knuckleballer Charlie Zink. And
Knuckleballer Charlie Zink.
Louis threw a knuckleball, so I have little doubt that there were some great conversations there that helped him on that unlikely path. But yeah, what an incredible commitment and love for the game he exhibited, and he was like he really represents something that in terms of the competitor and the talent that in those complete games that we don't see anymore.
No doubt about that. We'll be talking a lot about it on the broadcasts as we look back at 1975. And then we'll look ahead with an important week looming. We'll be back at it later this week, diving into the Peloton. We'll see how the Arc de Triomphe is still a long ways away, but you got to get through the mountain stages to be in a position to be racing down the Champs-Élysées. So we'll see how it all goes. Alex, always a pleasure to use a little bit of French and to talk baseball with you.
Good cycling talk, Tom. Good cycling talk.
It's about all I got, both in French and in cycling. But there it is. I
Mais
threw it
oui.
all out there for you. Merci beaucoup, mon ami. That is Alex Spear. I'm Tom Carey. We thank you for listening to this edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series best-selling truck in America for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. For Alex Spear, I'm Tom Caron, and all the hard-working crew behind the scenes. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for checking it out.